Right, good evening everybody, good evening members. I'd particularly like to extend a welcome to those new members of the Planning Committee. This is our first Planning Committee of the new administration. So I'd also like to welcome the officers and members of the public. First, we'll start with an apology in that, that we have had a technical hitch, so there is no, it's not possible to view this meeting on our YouTube channel this evening. It is being recorded, and it'll be possible to view it tomorrow during the day. So we'll move on to the agenda. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence. We've had a few apologies this evening, with an apology from Councillor Abbott, who is going to be substituted by Councillor Thorogood. Apology from Councillor Beavis. We don't have a substitute for her. Also apologies from Councillor Finken. We don't have a substitute for him. And apologies finally from Councillor Hayes, who's being substituted by Councillor Bowers. That is everyone. Next item, declarations of interest. I'd like to make a joint declaration, non-pecuniary interest in, George Courthold, as his father is a member of this council, so I think we should make a declaration there. Does any other member have any declaration of interest they'd like to declare? Councillor Shreer.
I'd just like to declare an interest in the fact that I also know George Courthold here socially as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shreer. Anybody else?
Well, I guess I ought to do the same, having met George at various functions when I was Mayor of Halstead.
Thank you, Councillor Mundy. Right, no further declarations. We'll move on. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. The previous meeting was held on the 18th of April, but unfortunately the minutes are not quite ready, but will come before us at the next meeting. Item 4, public question time. We have no general public questions this evening, so we'll move on to item 5, which are our planning applications. First application to be considered this evening is application number 22-01217 REM, which is land at Haverhill Business Park, Phoenix Road, Hellions, technically in Hellions Bumpstead, but really in Haverhill. We have two speakers this evening. So the first speaker is Mr. David Roach. If you'd like to come to the chair and press the button on the microphone until the red light comes on, and then in 3 minutes, Mr. Roach. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good evening, members. We wish to object to this application on the following grounds regarding means of access. The proposed entrance to the site is cutting into one of the major routes, Bumpstead Road, that comes into Haverhill, and it's only a short distance from the roundabout which serves the warehouses that generate hundreds of HGV movements a day. Vehicles can queue when McDonald's is built, and that can create problems for all the other traffic that's there. Data recorded by the Town Council with their vehicle activated signs clearly show the majority of vehicles on a daily basis exceed the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, with speeds having been recorded in excess of 70 miles an hour, with the average well over the statutory limit. How you can say you don't need a traffic survey as traffic assessment to see the impacts of hundreds of extra car movements visiting the site is depriving your committee of the full impact of your decision making. Bumpstead Road also serves as an access to numerous other commercial sites and businesses, and a further junction on the road would increase the risk of accidents. The site already has access available from both Phoenix and Hellions Bumpstead Roads. The site is not in walking distance of the town centre, and although the application is for a drive-through, this is a McDonald's restaurant. This is likely to attract many footfall customers who are not old enough to drive and do not own a vehicle. There is no continuous footpath running the length of Bumpstead Road, or indeed any pedestrian crossings, and with speeding vehicles, this has the potential to cause fatal accidents. I would therefore suggest this is not a sustainable development and wholly inappropriate for the location in terms of access. Whilst Braintree's officers have recommended approval, objections from both West Suffolk District Council and Suffolk Highways have been ignored. Braintree have failed to carry out either the traffic assessment or noise impact assessments requested by West Suffolk. The developer carried out their own traffic assessment while there was a partial road closure due to roadworks. If they had been done then, if they have been done by Braintree, then they've been failed to be published on your website. And it means that you as a committee do not have the evidence to make a decision. So we would urge Braintree, if you can't refuse this application as presented on access and safety grounds, at least please defer it, do the traffic and noise assessments and come back so you've got evidence to make a valid decision.
Thank you, Mr. Ricks. Well timed. Now, the next person to speak is going to come in virtually, I believe, Alison, and his name is Mr. Aaron Lucarini, who is a councillor for Haverhill, as a district councillor representing Haverhill, I believe.
And he's speaking in his private capacity.
Sorry, he's speaking in his private capacity. Thank you, Alison.
Hello, Mr. Lucarini, can you hear us?
I can. Hopefully you can hear me.
Would you like to make your statement now, please? Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to make clear that I'm speaking today as a member of the public. I'm speaking in support of the Reserved Matters application for the construction of McDonald's in Haverhill. If you ask Haverhill residents which shops they'd like to see in Haverhill, you will often get a list that contains McDonald's. So it's no surprise that this application attracted thousands of combined likes and positive comments across local Facebook groups. The restaurant chain has tried multiple times to open in Haverhill, and this time I feel they've found the right site, situated just off of Haverhill's bypass, opposite a hotel, away from housing estates, and surrounded by local employment land. The restaurant will be a welcome addition to Haverhill, serving residents, workers, and those travelling past the town as they cross the Essex-Cambridgeshire-Suffolk border. Previously, concerns have been raised over the site entrance. In my opinion, I see very little cause for concern. Bumpstead Road is currently 30 miles an hour. The entrance is proposed to go halfway on a 170-metre stretch of road from the roundabout to the next junction. I believe this is an ideal location as it's far enough away from either junction to cause an issue, and building up of this area will visually give drivers more to consider, in turn slowing them down. The alternative, as a couple of others have proposed, is Phoenix Road. Phoenix Road is already serving 8 other businesses, with 6 junctions along its short length. The road is lined with parked lorries waiting to go into surrounding warehouses. Adding a further junction on Phoenix Road would be dangerous, especially with the limited visibility around parked lorries and the many other junctions drivers need to take into consideration. On an additional note, these lorry drivers have suffered for years with no surrounding facilities to eat and drink at while they're waiting for their turn to be tipped, sometimes for many hours at a time. I'm sure this restaurant will be a welcome addition, hopefully alleviate some of the previous environmental health issues that Braintree District had for drivers. I disagree entirely with West Suffolk Council's comments, which no local members were consulted on, and are completely at odds with residents, Haverhill Town Council and Sturmer Parish Council. The site does not need hiding from public view and is in no way stark. The site will only be visible from surrounding industrial estate roads and will vastly improve the current patch of scruffy-looking wasteland that has been an undesirable gateway entrance to Haverhill for years. In comparison, West Suffolk Council approved the vast grey box-shaped warehouses across the road, which can be seen across Haverhill. I'd rather have this single-storey restaurant with outside seating and visible park, hopefully with children playing and having fun. I hope we can soon welcome McDonald's to Haverhill, along with the additional employment it will bring. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucarini. There are no other people wishing to speak, so we'll now move on to the presentation, which is going to be given by Carol Wallace. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. This application is a Reserved Matters application for all reserved matters. Let me show you the location plan. The red line shows the application boundaries for these reserved matters, and the blue boundary here shows the land ownership of the same applicant. This application site is the very last it forms part of the last plot of land within a larger outline consent. This slide shows you the original outline consent, and it shows you the indicative parameters. As you can see, the star here shows the location of this application site. It forms the wider parcel of Northwest 2 parcel, which is the last parcel within this outline consent that hasn't had reserve matters agreed yet. And this is the aerial plan. So this is the proposed site layout plan. This application is for a McDonald's drive-through restaurant. Access has been agreed as part of the original outline to take from Bumstead Road, shown here. The applicant is now also seeking for approval for access matters that relate to the internal layout of this site, as well as how it relates to the remaining parcel of Northwest 2 parcel of land. The site itself is 0.66 hectare in size, and the proposed single-story built drive-through restaurant, is about 426 square meters in size. As you can see here, within the outline, within the site layout, a total of 45 parking spaces plus another 3 accessible parking spaces will be provided. A total of 3 electric vehicle charging points will be provided as well. This slide shows the proposed ground floor and the roof plan of the development. As you can see here, the floor plan, the restaurant itself will have about 128 square meters of floor space for the restaurant sitting areas. And this slide shows you the sectional plan to show the relationship of the proposed drive-through restaurant compared to Bumstead Road. The top one shows the cross-section. As you see at the bottom, in the middle of the sign, on the left-hand side is Bumstead Road, and the existing roadside hedge and trees are here. And the bottom one shows the sectional plans that wrap around of the application sign that shows the view and scene from Hillian Bumstead Road looking towards Phoenix Road direction. And the travel lodge is at the back here. So the next two slides shows you some photos that has been provided by the applicant. So this is the sample photos that shows the proposed appearance and materials of the drive-through restaurants. And this one shows the top left photo shows the play frame proposed to the west of the drive-through restaurant. The top right shows the proposed canopy for the drive-through loop. And the bottom picture shows the outdoor seating areas and the furniture, including the planters here. So this slide shows some of the visual perspective provided by the applicant. The one on the top left shows the view from Bumstead Road looking from the north towards the west, towards the south direction. These are the roadside hedge, and the proposed building is indicated here, together with the proposed totem sign, which is the subject of another a separate advertisement consent application. The top right photo shows the view from the south of the junction along Bumstead Road, looking towards the side, and Phoenix Road is on the left here. So the proposed building is indicated here. The bottom pictures shows here the cross sections looking from Bumstead Road towards the site. So we have the Phoenix Road on the left here, and then the proposed building is here. And the existing roadside hedge and trees are along here, which is the southern boundary of the application site. So this drawing shows the existing and proposed levels of the development. Apologies, it's a little bit more difficult to see from here, but the existing levels shows in the blue line. As you can see here, along the southern application boundaries, there's a very steep slope from the middle of the site towards Phoenix Road. And the site gently slopes from the northeast corner towards the middle of the site, and a large proportion of the site at the moment. The site itself is vacant and undeveloped at the moment, but there's a large general flat platform within the middle, and that's why the applicant is proposing to mainly use this flat platform for the proposed drive-through restaurant. The existing slope and the embankment will not be altered by the applicant or the proposal. So here are some of the site photos that shows you the situation of the site. As you can see, this is a junction of Phoenix Road and Bumstead Road on the right-hand side, and the site is behind the large sign here. So this is a wheel to show the situation of the site. The top photo is wheel from Bumstead Road from the east of the site, and the bottom picture shows the wheel from Phoenix Road between the roadside hedge. So there's more pictures that shows you the change of gradient from the northwest corner of the site. The top photo shows is from the Haver Hill side looking uphill towards Travel Lodge. The application site is within here. And the bottom photo shows is from the immediate south of the agreed site entrance along Bumstead Road. And it also shows the common group building, which is opposite side of Bumstead Road. There's some more pictures showing some existing developments to the north and northeast of the site. To the north of the site is some commercial building, and northeast are the residential properties that falls within the administrative boundaries of West Suffolk Council. And here are the existing situations of the wheels along Phoenix Road. As you can see from the top is a Travel Lodge, which is opposite the site to the south of the site. And this is another photo that shows the existing road towards the western part of Phoenix Road. So key consideration for these applications. The site itself is designated employment land on the adopted local plan. The principle of development has been established under the previous outline consent granted together with access. The application number is 15-01477 outline. In order to fulfill the requirement of the new local plan policy LPP 59, the applicant has provided a rapid health impact assessment, and it has demonstrated that there's no cluster of hot food takeaway within the local area, and educational facilities are over 1.2 kilometers away from the site as well. So the conclusion, officer agree with the conclusion that there will not be any adverse significant health and well-being impact of the development. In terms of design and appearance, officers consider that the design and appearance are acceptable, especially in regards to the location of the site within an existing business park. In terms of trees and landscaping, the applicants propose to remove the roadside hedge for in order to provide the visibility space for the agreed entrance. The amount of hedge to be removed is about 16 meters wide. Apart from that, there's no other existing trees will be removed from site. However, there's also no new tree plantings along the new access road at the moment. There's no concern in terms of flood risk and drainage system. So some more key considerations related to highways and amenities. So one thing we need to point out is that the proposal currently, although proposing about 48 parking bays, each of the parking bays are of the size of 5 meters times 2.5 meters wide, which is slightly smaller than the preferred dimension of Essex parking standard, which is 2.9 meters times 5.5 meters long. Officers considered the parking layout and has been in discussion with Essex Highways. However, officers are of the view that given the nature of the drive-through restaurant, it would be it would be acceptable to accept a slightly smaller parking bay area instead of losing about 1/3 of the proposed parking space. That will also help to alleviate if there's any queuing for the drive-through facilities. Within the site layout, there's a dedicated internal loop which is able to accommodate about 24 vehicles queuing within the site. And that also includes 3 clearly marked waiting bays near to the building. And if required, there could be more temporary assigned bays for people waiting to collect from the restaurant. So it will be something that will be managed by the operator. In terms of consultation and representation, there's some strong objections from West Suffolk Council and from local residents received. And the main objections are related to, as Mr. Crouch earlier mentioned, about whether there's considerations of alternate access and whether there's an updated transport assessment, the parking and queuing issues, pollution, littering, light nuisance, and antisocial behaviour. I will briefly respond to each of those. In terms of the access point, we have to highlight that the original, the access taking from Bumstead Road has been already considered and agreed as part of the outline. The outline concern also have a specific conditions that require any reserved matters to be in line with that particular access drawing. So any alternate access would require a full application to be considered. In terms of the transport assessment, there's no transport assessment submitted together with this application because there's no need to re-examine the traffic flow of the proposed drive-through restaurant. That is because when considering the outline consent, access, the proposed access location and in terms of the traffic flow or trip generation has already been taken into account. Both Suffolk Highways and Suffolk Highways did not raise objection in the outline stage. And in terms of the original transport assessment that has been agreed, there's already taken into scenarios that take into account a proposed drive-through restaurant. There's nothing within the outline consent that specifies where the drive-through restaurant will be located within the wider outline site application, the outline site. And the traffic assessment, the original traffic assessment has already taken into account 5% of the total floor space to be dedicated for a drive-through restaurant, which is about 2,000 square meters. However, applying under this reserve matter application, the drive-through restaurant is only about 426 square meters, which is only about 25% of what has been taken into account in terms of trip generation. So the original transport assessment has taken into account any traffic flow from a potential drive-through restaurant and has considered that there's no significant adverse traffic impact. Essex Highways has considered the objection received under this reserve matters application, and in discussion with officer, is of the view that there's no significant change of traffic flow within the area. And because the outline consent is still extant, so it would not be reasonable to request for update of traffic assessment. In terms of parking and queuing, I mentioned a bit earlier in terms of the parking size. The queuing issue, as I mentioned earlier, there's quite significant amount of space could be accommodated for queuing traffic within the site without turning back onto Bumstead Road. And if needed, the operator can have staff to guide any customers to wait within the site and use up some of the parking bay. In terms of pollution, littering, light and nuisance or antisocial behaviour, the Council Environmental Health team has no objection and did not raise any concern, partly because the original outline consent already has a few conditions requiring details to be submitted in terms of heating, air conditioning, and noisy equipment to be installed. So this will be further assessed by officers. In terms of littering issues, the applicant has provided littering management plan of the operator, and if needed, they can provide more bins and require their staff to empty the bin more frequently. And there will also be patrol from staff on a daily basis, and if needed, they can increase the inspection time more frequently. In terms of light consideration of the light impact, the original light consent has conditioned to restrict the amount of light glare not to have glare impact to the nearby residents, and there's also conditions specifically require that there's to control the luminance of any lighting installation not to be exceeding 1 lux at the highway's boundary. The applicant has also confirmed that all the proposed advertisement or signs will be within the criteria and will not have any negative impact to the nearby residents. In terms of nuisance and antisocial behaviour, the applicant has also provided some in the operator guidance. They have submitted an antisocial behaviour workbook. So they have measures within the restaurant as well as within the outdoor seating areas. And they also work with police to enforce any antisocial behaviour. And I also want to highlight that the Environmental Health Officer has also highlighted that to take reference, the McDonald's within Galleys Corner, since operation, we have never received any complaints in terms of nuisance or antisocial behaviour. And it will be something that control under different regime. In terms of amenities, officers are of the view that there's no adverse impact has been identified. So the recommendation is to approve the application subject to the conditions highlighted on page 23 to 24 of the agenda. I'm happy to take any questions if need. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Just before I ask members of the committee for their comments on this application, can I just ask if you could address the question of the footpath along Bumpstead Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sorry, I should have included that bit. The original online conditions, the online consent has a condition, which is condition 4, that requires the applicant of the online consent to provide a dedicated footpath to link up the eastern side of Bumpstead Road to the north of the site, leading towards Hollands Road. So, dating back to 2020, there's already a legal agreement between Suffolk County Highways with the applicants who provide a Section 278 provision of the footpath as shown on the slide here, which is directly opposite to the junction of Hilliams Bumpstead Road, and it has been built and completed. And currently, there's an application with West Suffolk Council that is applying. Is an application to discharge the relevant condition 4. This is the latest revised plan that has been published against the application today. This is in response to the objection raised by Suffolk County Highways in late of June. Suffolk County Highways are of the view that there should be a connection from the north of Hilliam Bumpstead Road linking further to Ashley Road, further within West Suffolk County area. However, there's currently the application is still pending consideration, and I believe is currently consulting Suffolk County Highways in terms of the accessibility. But as far as I understand, the applicant is only proposing what's been shown here on the slide. So the one that I just showed in the earlier slide is the black section here that has been built under Section 278 and under the legal agreement. The red section is the existing footpath outside the nearby residence, and the green section is the one that not the applicant of this application, but the owners of the wider site is proposing to build the green section here. And a crossing point is proposed just to the north of Hollands Road. However, previously, Suffolk County Council is saying like it might not be a safe termination of the footpath, and they envisage to have a further extension further north to this part towards Ashley Road. However, as I said, like it's still currently pending discussion between the parties, and this is an application to be determined by West Suffolk Council. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Carol, for clarifying on that point. Members. Thank you, Councillor Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I just start off with, for the benefit of the new members, because obviously outline was given before this council, can we just be told exactly what the litter condition is on there, and then I'll go on from there. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, members. The original online consent do not have a specific conditions regarding litter. The litter condition will be enforced by the operator of this application.
Right, okay. I think I can speak, when I look round this table, I can speak that I have had 20 years of living closest to a McDonald's restaurant, takeaway, drive-through, whatever you call it, and I do take exception to the fact that the police may never have contacted Braintree District Council, but I can assure you that crime has been committed at that site on more than one occasion. But the biggest contention with any residents within a 3-mile radius of that restaurant is litter. Unfortunately, it can't be aimed at the restaurant's fault. It's the people who decide to drive away from the restaurant and then disperse of their litter through their car windows that then go everywhere, because I can guarantee you, if you walk through my village and the next two villages, you will see McDonald's, and it's quite easily identifiable, purely because it's advertising on its products. So whilst we can't narrow that onto this planning application, what I think is important, and this council has worked extremely hard with Braintree, well, it's Crescent actually, where it actually is, with that McDonald's on their litter collection, because it does need to be done, and it does need to be done further than the perimeter of McDonald's. It needs to be, well, I mean, it's up to them, because once if it is given permission, once it is established, you will see how far widespread. There's a councillor sitting right opposite me from Rain, who I am sure gets just as much of it as what the people in Crescent do. And I would imagine that, although he's not representing Rivenall, he knows about it very well. Councillor Thorogood will be aware of how far the litter spreads, and it is a nuisance. However, on planning conditions, because it's already been given outline planning consent, we have got no planning reasons to refuse this, in my opinion. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Parsflint. Any other members wish to make a comment? Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I endorse my colleagues' comments on litter, and I think if we approve this evening, one has to put some trust, considerable trust, in the operators that they will make big efforts to manage the litter around there, and that will be very necessary. But on planning grounds, this already has outline approval, so it is an agreed and approved site. It's designated for employment, so it's a very suitable site. I've had a look at the comments online, and although, yes, there are some objections, and we've heard some this evening from the speakers as well, on the whole, it seems that people will welcome this and find that it will be an asset to the local area. There are, as far as I can see, no planning grounds to refuse it this evening. So I will move officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Mundy.
Quite happy to second that, Chair, and I have nothing else to add. I'd endorse what Councillor Spray said and what Councillor Bowers-Flint said.
Thank you, Councillor Thorogood.
Yeah, thank you. I did think we weren't going to move recommendations until we'd all discussed it, but okay, it's been done now. But yeah, I'd just like to point out, I was a bit concerned that Suffolk County Council had now raised an objection, but that they hadn't done at the outline, so they are, I guess they've sort of shot themselves in the foot about that a bit, but I am concerned. I mean, how long ago was because obviously I'm new to this committee this time. Can you tell me when the outline consent was granted? Also, I just do have concerns about the parking when it says the parking spaces are smaller than would be wanted, because if anything, unfortunately, cars are getting bigger, and that could be a potential problem in the future. And also, only 3 spaces have been given for electric vehicle charging. Is there a minimum recommendation that what that should be? Because I think it works out about 6 or 7% of the total. Thank you.
Just before, can I just follow up on that, Carol, for picking up a point that Councillor Thorogood made? Just to have Suffolk Highways objected, or is it just West Suffolk Council? That's the only concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Just clarify, Suffolk County Highways has raised concern, and they also request an updated transport assessment, but just want to clarify, because the site fully within the administrative of Essex Highways, and Essex Highways take the lead and decide that there's no reason to require an updated transport assessment. In terms of the outline consent, it was granted in October 2016, and there's one of the conditions is to require all the reserved matters to be submitted within 10 years from the date of approval. So the outline consent currently is still extended. Parking areas. Just want to highlight that as compared to other plots within the outline consent, obviously the majority of plots fall within West Suffolk area, and they have actually granted permission, detailed permission for sites that having parking bay that are even slightly smaller than the bay we're having here. So some of the parking bay they granted is only 2.4 meters and 4.8 meters long. So it is even slightly smaller than what we're seeing here. Electric vehicle charging. Currently, the new building regulations require commercial sites to provide at least one electric charging point, and the rest of the parking area will need to be provided with cables that are capable eventually to provide further charging. But the minimum requirement is to provide one charging point. So the applicant originally come in with two electrical charging point, and after have the discussion with officer and in view of the objection, they actually eventually increase one more EV charger, and that's actually provided for the disabled user in front of the building. So there's now altogether 3 charging points, and for the rest of the car park, the applicant is committed to provide cables, so there will be possibility to provide more if needed further down the line. Thank you.
Is that a separate point, Councillor Berwick?
Well, it was about litter actually, but so it is a separate point.
Well, I think Chris is going to say something on litter. Can I first bring in Councillor Ritchie, and then we'll listen to what Chris has to say on litter, and Bobby will answer your points.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a procedural point I'm hoping could be answered quite quickly. Outline planning permission. What's the validity terms of outline planning permission?
Sorry, Councillor Ritchie, was that the validity of outline consents? So, yeah, I appreciate the comments this evening in terms of the concerns over the transport assessment and the validity of it, given the age of the outline. But as long as the outline consent is still extant, which in this case it is, what we're dealing with this evening is a reserved matters application. So we're simply dealing with the detailed matters that are reserved from the outline.
So I thought outline permission only stood for 5 years.
So the timescales can vary depending on the scale of the development. So typically you would be talking about, depending on the scale of the development, you could be talking about a shorter period, but you can grant outline consent for a longer period of time. I'd have to defer to Carol on the timescale for the submission of reserved matters on in this particular case, if that's okay. But yeah, there is the authorities have got the ability to grant it for a longer period. But the key thing here is we've got a reserved matters application that has been lawfully submitted against an extant outline consent. So it means those principal considerations in relation to the transport assessment and the quantum of development and the uses that were consented, all of that effectively has been established under the outline. If we were dealing with a full planning application here this evening, which was not tied to any previous history, you would expect the application would be accompanied by an up-to-date transport assessment, and that's where possibly it would help address. But we're constrained effectively by the previous planning consent that's been granted here, and what we're dealing with is purely the detailed matters. But perhaps if I could just get Carol to verify the timescales.
Yes, for this particular outline consent, it has been granted 10 years for any reserved matters to be submitted, and the outline consent was granted in October 2016, so we are still within the 10-year period. Thank you.
And sorry, Councillor Ritchie, just to add to that, so again, for larger sites, the reason for that is just taking account that actually there will be a time period for those sites, those plots to come forward.
Thank you, Chris. I think we want to come back on the littering point as well.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So, mindful of the comments made in respect of litter, and would completely acknowledge and accept, sort of locally, and having that experience, that yeah, there are obviously these types of uses have the propensity to cause that issue. The application is supported by a strategy, which is a document submitted by the applicant. If members feel strongly about this, and I can understand the concerns in relation to it, we could add an informative to the decision to express the concern in relation to this and how we want the applicant to ensure adherence to that particular strategy. But that is something we could add to a potential decision if members feel strongly.
Well, my view is that the more we can say about litter, the better. I mean, I think the concern is that the litter strays well beyond the boundaries of the restaurant, many miles, but I'm not sure whether... I mean, if we can add something to that informative, we would expect the applicant to do all they can to address the problem of littering, not just in the immediate site, but in further afield. I'm not quite sure how you could word that, but it would be helpful. I think it's important to express our concern about that. Thank you. Councillor Thorogood.
Yeah, it's about litter, because you know, we get McDonald's wrappers in Coggeshall and Kelvin and Fearing, and you know, the nearest McDonald's are Tollgate and Braintree, so they're coming a long way, and they drive along, chuck it out the window, someone else's problem. So you can have a policy on the site. You know, some people are going to be eating in, some people might eat in the car park, and they might use the bins. But the people that it's a drive-through at the end of the day, they're going to be driving off and eating it elsewhere, and then tossing it aside. Now, there has been experiments where the registration numbers are put on the packaging somehow. I don't know if this is possible to have as a condition or at least a recommendation. I know it's not possible to put a registration on every straw and every French fries packet, but on the outer packet maybe. The bag that it comes in, I don't know if that's possible, but that does lead to, you know who it is, who chucks it, and can lead to convictions. Thanks.
Bring Councillor Bowes-Flint on that point.
Yeah, just on that point, it was actually on the receipts, not the packaging or anything. So you've just got to hope, and a lot of them do, they forget the receipts inside the bag, and that's how you can nail that back to that registration. But it worked, and people were prosecuted within this district for just that. So if I don't think you can enforce it conditionally, but we can, as an informative, if they can do that, then we can try it. But if the proposer and seconder's happy, I would certainly endorse the litter collection and the times and that. And you will only time will tell once it's open how far it's going to be thrown and how far it's going to go. But I think if we can get that in there, at least that does do that, because you've got no control over these people, unfortunately.
So I think my concern about the suggested condition is the enforceability point in terms of whether or not it meets the test, in terms of how we would then enforce the condition. So yeah, and I'm not aware of a similar condition being used elsewhere. So I think we could certainly suggest something along those lines within informative, linked to the management plan. But I mean, picking up on Councillor Thorogood's point, there is a limit in terms of what the operators of the restaurant can do, because obviously the impacts could be much further afield. So it would be much more of a localised management plan in terms of trying to clean up effectively anything around the immediate area. But we could certainly strengthen it through informative, as I said. But I think a condition would go beyond what we could do in this case.
Yes, thank you, Chris. I think we understand that. But would we be able to put on the informative something about considering keeping the registration numbers of customers? Okay, members. Anybody else got any further comments to make? One more comment from Councillor.
Well, it's only an apology from me, Chairman, because I had completely forgotten about the new rule about not moving anything until everybody's had a discussion. Old habits die hard, I'm afraid, but I'll try not to do it again.
Completely understand.
I'll second that as an apology.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Spray and seconded by Councillor Mundy that we grant this application with the additional informative. All those in favour, please. That is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. So that application has been granted. We'll just leave members of the public. I imagine some of them not interested in attending the next application. Leave the room. So our next application is item 5B, which is application number 23/00409 full, which is land south of 39th Street, White Notley. And we do have a speaker representing the applicant, who's Mr. George Courtauld, who's also going to give him permission to bring his model to the table. Yeah, press the button on the microphone. Thanks.
That one there. Okay, hello, and thank you very much for giving me my 3 minutes on this project. This is the first one of these I've done, and I think the first for quite a few people here as well. My main reason for speaking is to try and show the committee how this site is absolutely perfect for the 2 houses that have been proposed. There are 4 key points that the planning officers have highlighted as concerns that I'd like to address. Number 1, the development is outside the village envelope. The visual impact on White Notley, the ecological impact on the hedgerow, and the heritage impact. So number 1, outside the village envelope. The site directly borders White Notley village development boundary, is directly opposite the village hall, and has houses directly to the north and south of it along the street. The land is currently unusable scrubland, with an existing access to the road and almost no overlooking at all from surrounding neighbours. Braintree requires more than 720 new houses every year, and I understand that this proposal does not greatly add to this number, but it does still add something in a site that has very minimal impact on the village and its neighbours. At a time when the big house builders are slowing down, I believe there is very good reason to approve small schemes such as this. I would also like to highlight that there have been a number of developments on the outside of White Notley village envelope that have been turned over by the planning inspectorate in the last few years. Visual impacts on White Notley. We chose not to touch the mature hedgerow to the northeast of the site for the very fact that this completely screens the site from the road and neighbours along the street. The hedge along the eastern border is also being maintained and enhanced to prevent overlooking to the neighbour. And of course, we could alter the design to remove the balconies if the committee feels strongly on this. Semi-detached housing was chosen as this makes up the overwhelming majority of houses along the street and in White Notley itself. The officers have argued that the design does not respond to the locality and distinctiveness of White Notley. However, a drive down the street will show that there is no particular architectural style in the village, which primarily comprises of post-war houses with a large number of 1970s semi-detached dwellings. We chose a more rural design that would tie in with the surrounding barns and acknowledge that this development borders the village but does not sit within it. I'd also like to add that weatherboarding, which is discussed in the report, is not pastiche on a new dwelling, but is arguably the second most common type of cladding and helps break up settings. Okay, I didn't get very far with that, but I will quickly say I hope this demonstrates that this really will have very, very minimal impact to its site. And as a county, we need small sites like this to be given permission over massive housing developments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Courtauld.
3 minutes goes very quickly.
It does, yes. Good idea to practice with the alarm clock, with the timer. Right, so yes, if you
Shall I sit down?
Yes, please, and turn the microphone off. Thank you. That's great. And now I will hand over to Fiona Hunter, who's going to give the officers' presentation. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you. So this application is located on land south of 39th Street in White Notley, and it's for the erection of 2 3-bedroom semi-detached dwellings. So this should show the location of the plot. So you can see White Notley Village, and you can see that this is towards the northwest and it does sit outside of the designated village envelope, which runs along this boundary here, as does the White Notley Conservation Area. So to the northwest of the site, there's a pair of semi-detached dwellings. You've got Witham Road to the north of the site, and then down here there's a property known as Leylandi, and also this complex of listed buildings in association with White Notley Hall, which is a Grade 2-star building, and then to the west you've got agricultural land. So here's the location plan, so you can see a little bit more closely its relation with neighbouring properties, and you can see on this location plan this established, mature hedgerow and tree belt that you've got running along Witham Road, which also wraps around kind of this northeastern boundary of the site here. There is also a hedgerow running along this boundary here, and this large mature oak tree, which you'll be able to see in some of the photos as I go onwards. So here is a picture of the site, which is from the junction with Witham Road / the street, looking from the access track into the site, and so you can see those mature trees, and you can see some of this hedgerow running along this boundary here, and you've got that large oak tree in the background. There is also a public footpath running along this track here as well. So this is from the southern boundary of the site, so you can see that this is the hedgerow running along that boundary there. You've just got the oak tree just off to the left of the picture there, and you can see again that mature tree line there. And again, this is that mature oak tree, so this is looking kind of out towards the northwest. And here again, looking back along the access track, so you can see this neighbouring property here, Leylandi, which is a single-storey dwelling. And again, you can just see this kind of vegetation along this boundary here. Again, that's just more of a view of that Leylandi property. And a view into the site from the western boundary, so this is from kind of the countryside site of the site. And then this is that complex of listed buildings that I mentioned to the south of the site. So you've got a converted barn there along with a few other listed buildings. So the proposal is for a pair of semi-detached dwellings, each with 3 bedrooms, and you can see that they would sit towards the centre of the site, set back from that, from the kind of established tree line along Witham Road, each with large amenity area to the rear, and you can see that there would be an access formed here within that hedgerow from the access track there. So this is just showing the ground floor plans of each of the dwellings. So you've got double garages to each of the dwellings, and here you've got the 3 bedrooms. So you can see these roof terraces on top of those double garages. So I thought the easiest way was to show them was using the proposed sketch here, so you can kind of see the material palette proposed for the dwellings, and you can see those large kind of gable fronts to the dwellings, along with those double garages and large roof terraces, along with the retention of that oak tree there. And so again, this is from the rear. So as pointed out, the main considerations in terms of this application are the location of the application, which is outside of a defined development boundary, so therefore it is contrary to the development plan unless material considerations determine otherwise. In this instance, whilst it is acknowledged that it is adjacent to the village envelope, White Notley is a 3rd tier village, so in terms of access to day-to-day facilities, while there is some, there would be a heavy reliance on a private vehicle. In terms of the design of the properties, White Notley is characterised within this area of having quite kind of simplistic frontages to the dwellings, whilst they are semi-detached as this proposes. This proposal would be quite a stark contrast to the dwellings that are in the proximity of the site. So in terms of the ecology impacts of the proposal, then there's that established hedgerow along the kind of southeastern boundary of the site, and our ecological consultants have raised a holding objection because they consider that there is not sufficient information in order to establish any potential impact on a priority habitat. So there was a preliminary ecological appraisal submitted with the application, which identified that if there was any impact on kind of that hedgerow along there, that further surveys may be required, and our ecological consultant has also confirmed that further surveys would be required in order to assess that impact on priority habitats and to establish if the hedgerow is important as set out within the hedgerow regulations. As I previously mentioned, then to the south of the site are also a complex of listed buildings, and our historic buildings consultant provided comment on the application stating that there was insufficient information in order to that was assessing the impact on the setting of those listed buildings and the setting of the conservation area, whilst they have said that the principle of dwellings there may be acceptable from a heritage perspective, the design of the dwellings wouldn't be appropriate. So as you can see there, those adverse impacts are set out. The benefits of the proposal would be the construction of the dwellings and the additional occupants come for the vitality of White Notley, and also the provision of 2 dwellings to the council's housing land supply. However, it's not considered that those benefits would outweigh the harms that have been identified. So therefore, the recommendation is that planning permission is refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Pass this over to members. Who's going to speak first? Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the design of the dwellings is interesting, and actually I don't mind it. I don't dislike it, but not in this setting. I think that's one of the problems, which certainly the officers picked up in her report. And thank you for your presentation, Fiona. I just don't think it's a good fit for what is a very rural location. I think there are other areas where it might not look out of place, but I think it does here. But even leaving that aside, there are a number of things missing, such as heritage assessment, and there's a lack of information on the ecological impact. So I think it's pretty. I mean, I don't disagree at all with the view that we do need small developments in the villages. I think that's something to be applauded and entirely a good thing. But this one just isn't right. So yeah, for me, it's just not suitable, both on design grounds, but also for the lack of information. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. Councillor Thorogood.
Yeah, just got one question. Might actually be for the applicant. When I was looking at the plan from above of the buildings, it looks like they're slightly at a crescent. I just wondered why that was. I was just intrigued really about why that design had come about.
So you can't ask the applicant. You can only ask the officers at this stage.
I was going to say, from discussion with the applicant, then it's been to kind of bear in mind that kind of pattern of development. Then their idea was that it would face towards the road at that angle as the cyclist.
Councillor Holland.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm afraid it might sound as though I'm going to disagree with my colleague to my immediate right, because I look at this and I've looked at the street view and the street scene that this would fit into, and we have to bear in mind that, as the photograph illustrated, the hedge, which might be considered to provide some screening, is only going to do that for some months of the year, certainly not in the winter. And so this will be seen as part of the street scene. And looking at the architecture and style of architecture in which it would be set, I'm not the least bit convinced that it's out of place. Indeed, the originality of the design and its nod in design clues towards a more rural style of architecture, I think are actually potentially beneficial. So I can't agree with the reservations about the architecture or its place there. Indeed, I find I have the same issue with the argument around heritage assets, because there are other buildings which are closer to the listed asset, which to my mind are more compromising than this proposed design. So I'm not too sure about that. There are other issues which I think we need to bear in consideration, and the applicant in his deposition today has gently alluded to it. This location is outside the built-up area boundary, but only just outside it. And one has to, I believe, look at this, not just from the point of view of a planner, but I'm here to look at it from the point of view of a resident, somebody around and about the place. And what I see is an application for two houses which sit on the settlement side of what appears to be the last house along the run in that road. And therefore, it, for me, actually sits comfortably within what an uninformed person might regard as being that village. And therefore, given the fact we don't have a 5-year land supply that we can demonstrate and we have to apply the tilted balance, it does seem to me that the consideration that it's outside the built-up area boundary is not a strong argument for refusal. When I take this together with the fact that in the National Planning Policy Framework that the most fundamental premise is in favour of sustainable development, and bearing in mind the interpretation of the meaning of the word sustainable in this context, I look at this village, and being a member who comes from a rural area, I consider the number of amenities that are present in this village to suggest to me that this is, by rural standards, quite a sustainable location. And so taking all of these issues together, I personally find the planning balance to be a very finely judged thing. And when I see an application that sits in that place on the planning balance, what I also am cognizant of is that what happens if we refuse this and it goes to the planning inspector. And in that context, I look at other decisions that I've seen made around and about the area by the planning inspector. And I have to say that I feel that we would be on tenuous ground, and there is a real prospect that our decision to refuse would be overturned at appeal. And all of those things taken together, I have to say very sadly, means that I am given to go against officer recommendation on this application.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Anybody else like to contribute to the debate on this item? It looks like a no on that one. So would anybody like to move officer's recommendation? Is that fine, seconder? Councillor Bowes-Flint, would you like to comment at all? Or?
No, only that I agree with what Councillor Spray said previously. I know this village very well because it's the next village to where I live. And the amenities there are not great at all. Well done to Fiona for an excellent presentation. And to be fair, well done to the applicant in trying his best and doing his best. And please do not take this personally. But I think the design is absolutely awful. And I know that design is a personable thing, but to put this kind of design in that area, to me, is short of criminal, really. But I know that it's subjective, and it always will be and always has been, and a younger person than me would most probably love it, to be fair. I accept that I'm old. I was on this council with your grandfather, so that's how old I am. But that is only my personal opinion on the design. It really is. But I just think, as Councillor Spray has said, it's the wrong design in the wrong place, but agree that villagers still do need small developments. Thank you.
Thank you. So just will myself make a comment on that. It's actually I really quite like the design. So it just goes to show that it's a personal opinion, and I think it's a rather nice contemporary design, and I quite like trying to introduce a bit more contemporary architecture in this district. But that's a personal comment. Well, it's a subjective comment, I'll put it like that. So we've had, it's been moved by Councillor Spray, seconded by Councillor Bowers-Flint, that we refuse this application. All those in favour of refusal? All those against refusal? I'm afraid that application has been refused. So we'll now move on to our final application this evening, which is an application that is coming across. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've just realised that as portfolio holder for economic growth and inward investment, I've just assigned the funding of this next application to a contractor. Therefore, I think it'd be more than prudent if I'll give my apologies and ask if I could absent myself from this last item, please, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Yes, but I presume Councillor Bowers is going to say the same thing?
Similarly, as the Cabinet Member responsible for property and assets in the district, for transparency, I would declare an MPI in the item and leave the meeting for this. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, no, thank you, both of you. I think that's wise, and Alison will note that as a declaration of interest. So I'll wait for you to leave the room and then we'll continue with the meeting. Good night, both of you. Right, so our final application this evening is, as you might have realised, application by Ranger District Council. The application number is 23/00956 LBC, which is at the Town Hall, 61 Newland Street, Witham. And Chris is going to do, we have no speakers, so Chris would move straight on to the presentation given by Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. So this is an application for listed building consent. It's being reported because the applicant of the application is Branch District Council. The application proposes internal alterations only, and it's to facilitate the provision of a new changing places toilet facility at the Town Hall in Witham. So I'll just take you through the location plan and the block plan. I've got a few photos and then just a floor plan. So site location plan here, slightly zoomed in version of the block plan, and really what will show it is the photos really that show the actual area of the toilets, so which is a more modern addition to the building. So you can see on the left and on the right hand side there, and the window arrangement. So no external alterations, it's purely internal. A couple of other photos that show the access to the main high streets. And then in terms of what's proposed, so the plan on the left shows the existing arrangement, so two separate toilet facilities at the moment, male and female, and the proposal to install the new facility, which would be a fully accessible toilet facility for all persons, including disabled persons. So in terms of the key considerations in this particular case, so as I said, this part of the building is a more later addition to the Town Hall. There's no direct impact or harm that we feel that would be caused to the historic fabric of the building in this particular case. As with all heritage applications, we've sought advice from our historic buildings consultant, who's raised no objections to the proposal, and as officers we feel the proposal is fully compliant with policy LPP 57, which is the relevant local plan policy on heritage, and the NPPF. So our recommendation is to grant listed building consent in this case. And obviously the implication of that would be to allow the provision of a purpose-built good facility for the use of users of the Town Hall. Happy to answer any questions, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. Does anybody have any questions for Chris, or would anybody like to make any comments on this small application? Councillor Hooks.
I just want to say I think it's a fabulous idea. I think
the disabled access toilets. There needs to be more of them for bigger wheelchairs, changing facilities are very much needed. So I think it's a very positive change for Britton Town Hall.
Social benefits. Anybody else? Councillor Monday.
I'd just like to endorse the viewpoint of my fellow councillor, and if we're not going to have another discussion about it, I'd move for the grant the LBC on this.
Can I have a seconder? Councillor Holland. So moved by Councillor Monday, seconded by Councillor Holland, that we grant this application. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. That brings us to the end of our meeting. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Bye.